The Barkays. Sing it with me, kids. Alderman Bill Conway's here. We're here to announce that that's his walk-up music now at all city council meetings.
You get a little funky with it. I love it.
Yeah.
It'd be perfect if y'all had walk-in music like this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Your ward is?
The 34th Ward. It represents most of the Loop, a lot of the West Loop. Greektown, Little Italy as well, and part of the South Loop as well.
Yeah. It's a big responsibility, and you meet in the city council, and the mayor, of course, is at the meeting. He's terribly helpful. And on Wednesday, if I have this right, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there was a consensus of agreement on a couple of major issues, and the mayor shot them both down.
Well, we have... So for example, on the bond fund, that was actually just delayed from Wednesday to today, as well as the migrant funding.
And that wasn't the mayor's call?
It was, but it was like a controlled can kicking to prevent other people from doing other shenanigans, like myself.
But it's not helpful. No. You guys have a lot to do.
We do.
And when you have time in a meeting where you've reached a consensus, obviously the mayor has to have the power to say no to things.
Yeah.
But there was no reason that I saw that was given for kicking it down the road.
Yeah, we could have just voted on it Wednesday, and now we have to go back here Friday afternoon. I thought it was an odd thing to do, but oddly enough, the proponents of it did it and tried to do it in such a way so that we'd come back Friday as opposed to delaying it until May. So it was kind of a bunch of procedural shenanigans.
But was there some hope that bringing it back on a Friday meant a lot of people wouldn't show up to vote?
I don't know. We'll see what happens today. Even though I'll be no on both those things, unfortunately, I think they will both pass today in City Council.
We should talk both. All right, let's talk about the first issue is the $1.25 billion with a B bond deal that you're going to be voting on today. Mm-hmm. Why do we need this? Can we afford this? What will this do?
So what this is, it's a bond authorization to issue $1.25 billion in bonds. And the proposed use for that is community grants as well as to build affordable housing in Chicago. Broadly, I support that idea. We clearly have a housing shortage in Chicago, which has led to an affordable housing shortage in Chicago, but there are so many unknowns with this. What's this going to do to our bond rating? Mm-hmm. This is being funded by some of the tax increment financing districts that are expiring. So from property taxes that will, for example, come from.
But that doesn't make up all of it. The TIF money.
No. The plan is for it to, the CFO will tell you it does, but that's exactly it. I'm concerned about when these things are reassessed. For example, the biggest TIF in the city is LaSalle Street. And from what I'm hearing, that the office building values have really fallen over the course of, in fact, I think any child would tell you that. Right. So that is, that's a concern.
And the problem with this continues to be that if you have vagaries in where money is going to be spent and how it's going to be spent, you shouldn't be given the money. It needs to be specific. And frankly, this is why the mayor lost in a big way this Bring Chicago Home thing.
Right.
Because it was great to run commercials and say this is going to help the homeless problem in the city. Well, all it was doing was going into a big bucket, and it could have been spent in any way whatsoever.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are significant trust issues between city council and the mayor's office, citizens and city government, really.
But is the mayor doing anything? Alderman Conway's thrilled he came in this morning. Is the mayor doing anything to bridge that gap? Does he recognize the trust issue? Is he going to the aldermen, the alderwomen, and saying, let's talk this out?
Well, in press conferences, he has really doubled down on going forward with this bond initiative and not really acknowledging the Bring Chicago Home issues.
Right. So, and then there's the argument too of do we want as a city, the affordable housing on LaSalle Street, which is typically a financial district, a business district. There's something to be said for keeping the business district profitable and thriving and whatnot, and then building the affordable housing or any sort of housing around this area. Because you know what I mean? Starting from the nucleus and then building out.
One thing I will say is, so this bond is not set to none of those proceeds are going to be used for LaSalle Street because the LaSalle Street TIF is still around until 2030.
Okay.
But its expiration will pay off the bond, but the bond proceeds won't be used for LaSalle Street. But that's exactly it. I think it's something that on this bond idea that we should walk before we run, and try it before we commit ourselves to $1.25 billion that will all be spent in the next couple of years and we'll be paying off at a little over $80 million a year from now until 2061.
Yeah, and the TIF money to me is the ultimate discretionary fund, so it needs to be targeted in ways it hasn't been before. And it's not like New York and Dallas and other cities don't have these sorts of issues, but Chicago has a history of having city council and the mayor's office not be straight with the public. And at a time when the public has less confidence than ever in politics in general, specificity, the professional speaker said, is absolutely needed. And one of the things I appreciate about you is you deal with us directly, you deal with this directly, and you speak up when you think something's wrong.
Well, I like to do that, especially at 7 o'clock in the morning, too.
Exactly.
When I'm
I
at my
gave you
best.
30 seconds after you sat down. What are you complaining about?
I love it. I love it. Absolutely. In fact, actually, I was woken up this morning. My 3-year-old came in the room, and she gets very excited when I go on the radio. So she's like, for some reason, she'll call me Bill. She goes, Bill, get up, Bill. And I look up, and she's standing over me like Muhammad Ali over Sonny Liston. Get up. You got to go on the radio.
That's adorable. You should bring her in sometime.
Oh, yeah.
Is she listening right now?
What's that?
Is she listening right now?
She is listening right now.
Well, say hi to her.
Yeah. Hi, Birdie. I told you I was going on the radio.
Birdie, good job getting Daddy up.
Go back to bed. Don't give Mommy any trouble.
No, good job, Birdie.
You're
a good kid, Birdie. Birdie's worried about the TIF districts.
She sure is.
Well, keeps her up at night. Or maybe because she grew up in Europe, she stays up till all hours of the... she was born in Germany when I was on military deployment, so that's why I think she always stays up till like 11
o'clock at night. She has a glass of wine before dinner.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to do them?
Come back, take up the other issue right after the break.
Migrants,
but I do want people to understand a little bit of your background, too. So give me 30 seconds on your military career.
Yeah, so I joined, I tried to sign up for the military right out of college, but I had heart surgery as a kid, so I was not allowed to join, oddly enough, and then they changed all the rules. So I signed up for the military back in 2012 and got a medical waiver, and I signed up to join the JAG Corps, which is like, the lawyers, and took an aptitude test, and they said, we'd rather you be an intelligence officer, which I don't know how I did. Good, bad, who knows how I did.
Right.
And then since then, I've been deployed to Qatar and then forward to Afghanistan, as well as Germany during COVID. So very, very high-level strategic stuff.
And every couple months, you're still in the reserves.
I still go on drill 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year. So it has been...
and in worst-case scenario,
still serving. God
forbid we get into any sort of extended conflict, but you're not off the hook to being called back into service.
I am still an active reservist. I was told by the Director of Veterans Affairs in the city that I am the first and only active reservist in the history of City Council. So who would have thought
That's awesome.
white guy could be the first anything in City Council these days, but,
right.
I guess that's the
awesome.
first one.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, that's a shock to me because I didn't even know he was white. All right, Bill Conway, more from you in a moment. The alderman's here. We're giving you the straight story on City Hall from somebody who lives it every single day. 722. Stand by, still to come. Patrick Berger, who has thousands and thousands of vinyl records and yet still finds time to come to work. And an exclusive interview with the bull that gored Dr. Bill Hillman, who was on the show earlier this week. This is one of the bulls that runs in Pamplona. Well, we don't know if he's still running, but he'll be on the show. And security's trying to get him upstairs right now. I guess freight elevator, probably, huh?
Oh. Yeah, he probably would. I remember him from last time. Little poquito.
Yes.
Yeah. Un poquito?
Was it? I don't know. I don't know what the... I don't know how you...
It's Spanish.
I don't speak German. So I just don't know.
It was iffy.
Alderman Bill Conway, so we're talking about two big issues City Council has to re-examine today and vote on. What's the other one?
The second one is the $70 million package. This is to fund more funding for the asylum seekers, in addition to I think Nick said yesterday, $330 million that's already been allotted?
That sounds about right. Yeah, it depends how you break it up fiscally. Yeah. So it will be...
So again, can we afford this?
This will for this year, the sum total of the expense is $600 million. However, so previously we allocated in City Council 150 towards it. This would be another 70 to do that. And sort of in conjunction with that, the county will also put in 70, and the state will put in 182, which would take us to the 600.
Okay.
So that's the plan. And and actually, this is something that I have broadly supported this mission, because I think kind of what else can we do? But I voted yes on previous funding. I have hosted work authorization clinics for the migrants. In fact, my office was the first to do it in the state before the governor's office or mayor's office was doing it.
And you made that facility available in Greektown.
We did.
The youth hostel.
We did one of our clinics for all the folks at the Parthenon Guest House there, and we've since taken it more citywide. And I've been doing it in conjunction with the union, so they are able to get jobs after we get that. But the issue I have with this $70 million is we have $285 million of unobligated COVID money. Federal dollars we were given for a federal crisis.
Right.
And we could use, we previously used $95 million of that for this crisis. We could use 70 of that as well. Instead, we're taking it from the authorized fund balance, which is part of what goes to our advanced pension payment. So we're indirectly kind of reducing our advanced pension payment, or we're failing to augment it, depends on how you look at it.
And that's already a crisis in itself, funding the pensions,
and
right?
So I am very concerned about the fiscal health of our city, which is already in bad shape. Our pensions in total are less than 25% funded, and the fact that today we're going to issue a $1 billion plus bond that will be paying off at $80 million a year until 2061. Plus, we have this $70 million that we could be taking from another pot. It gives me serious concern.
I would be too.
Obvious follow-up.
I am.
You see that. You're speaking common sense. Why don't others see that?
Right.
I can't speak for others in council.
But when you bring that up, what do they say?
Well, they make a motion to table it, and then I lose. It's the way these things.
Table it, meaning until we'll get to it later.
I try to amend it, for example. So I tried to amend this $1.25 billion bond ordinance to $350 million. And the reason I picked that number was because the concern is that you have several of these TIF districts are expiring, and $350 million is essentially the cumulative amount of TIF districts that are expiring over the next 4 years. So that's all the dollars you would lose. So I said, why don't we make this $350 million, see how it works, and hey, if we are building affordable housing and expanding the tax base, we can always make it larger.
Right.
But let's run before we walk here.
All right, a couple of follow-ups related to this. If you're taking follow-ups, Steve Cochran, Bald Magazine. But my follow-ups, I think, are obvious as well. We've created this weird choice set that has to be made by the city council. Homeless folks or migrants. And it's weirdly, maybe ironically, sort of similar to the citizenship question that the federal government hasn't handled, which is if somebody's already here, why does somebody get to jump the line in some sort of new citizenship ruling that Congress may or may not ever do? Yeah. So I know this sounds weird, but if I'm a homeless person, I want to know why the migrants are getting access to things I'm not getting when I'm already sleeping on the streets in Chicago.
Which I think that's a very fair criticism. But they are, it is easier, for example, to provide resource to the migrant population because they are, a healthy bunch. Heck, they all walked 1,500 miles. So, it's a healthy bunch, and you can do that sort of in one chunk. But it really shouldn't be a either-or situation. Right. It should be a both-and situation. According to the Department of Public Health, we have, according to the last point in time study, where they do like a census, there was about 6,200 homeless people in Chicago. And you have living in shelters today about 12,000 migrants. So the concern is that if you suddenly cut off migrant funding, you would triple the size of the homeless population. Now, I will say oftentimes, this is really more for the viewers or the listeners, you often hear 68,000 homeless, and that is sort of people that are, couch surfing, et cetera. So if you expand the definition, so when I say 6,200, it's like the very specific sleeping on the streets number.
I was talking to a guy the other night who, it wasn't a terribly cold night when I was walking back after our trial of Pericles.
Yeah.
And he'd been on the street for 2 years. Typically, he's concerned about safety in the shelters.
Yeah.
And he said he was mugged by migrants. Now, think about that. You're homeless in Chicago.
Right.
And whether or not it's factual, I don't know. But I think it's a stark example of what can be happening in the streets to people who are in the streets. And I also don't understand why our governor is not knocking on the door of Governor Abbott of Texas and going, look, you made your point. There's no upside to continue to do this. Yes, the people of Texas should not have to absorb all of this. But how about you and I get on a plane and go to Washington and knock on the White House door and say, and you may call it a stunt, whatever, but knock on the White House door and say, look, I'm a Democrat as it gets. He's as Republican as it gets. We're here to tell you, you have to force Congress to get this done.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that Governor Pritzker has made many trips himself to the White House to try and to advocate for additional funding here. But it's clear there is a problem in the sense that it takes so long to process these asylum seeker applications. And then so we have this, when people, for example, they will call them illegals, for example. I mean, that's just not accurate. They're people that came here, they're seeking asylum, and by law, they have that right. But you should be able to process that very quickly, as opposed to saying, all right, now you're here in Texas, come back in 2 years for your court date. That is
right.
Obviously not the way the system should work. But here in Chicago, we these folks have come here and sort of what are the other options? And that's why I support this in spite of the
the humane thing to do. The humane thing to do is to take care of people who are on the streets.
Yeah.
But I don't see, and especially in an election year, I don't see the governor trying to do something in a bipartisan way. And frankly, you put pressure on Governor Abbott. If you went to the media and said, I'm going to Texas, see if Governor Abbott will go to Washington with me.
Well, I can't speak for the governor. By the way,
but you understand.
I get already enough trouble with the mayor. Don't get me in trouble with the governor, too.
Or do what you said, too. Use money that's already been allocated that we're not using, like the COVID money, instead of just like, let's borrow from every single entity and our bond rating then goes down.
Look, I just see it, as I said at the top, you are willing to talk about this and you're willing to handle these questions. It's an election year, so politics is what it is. But I could give a rat's ass if any of these people are reelected in Congress or the governor's mansions around the country. We have real problems that need to be settled. And sometimes you need to pull off a stunt like the one I'm describing to get people's attention.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, don't get, but I will say that I think that people in both parties will agree that the asylum process and the border is a broken system, and we need to do something different about it. But here in Chicago, we have to handle the crisis that has come to our doorstep, and
but
that's what we're trying to do.
If you got a cut on your arm, you're going to put a Band-Aid on it. You're going to try to stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
We're not stopping the bleeding. Migrants are still coming in all the time, so it seems like you got to go to the source and say we need to stop that to deal with what we already have.
And I hope that, and that was why I there was a bill in Congress that would have limited the border and also provided a quicker path to work authorizations, and it was tanked. And it was tanked by the Republicans. It's sort of at Trump's insistence. So I do think that the Democrats are trying to do something that would improve that situation that everybody agrees is not the right system.
Well, you talk to Republicans. You don't break out in hives. You don't suddenly have some sort of anaphylactic shock from it. So why can't others compromise? There's no good end game to this unless we have more of you and less of that. So I don't know if you believe in cloning, but, make a call. It's Alderman Bill Conway doing a job that others aren't doing, and I don't mean that in any funny way at all. We thank you, and good luck today at City Hall, just where you want to be on Friday.
Thanks, Alderman.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me, as always.
And your little girl's name again is?
Birdie.
Birdie!
I have
Birdie.
I have
Good
three.
morning, Birdie.
My older daughter, Bella, is watching, too.
Hi,
I don't
Bella.
want her to
Bella.
feel slighted. So.
Bella, Birdie, and?
Billy is my baby. She may not be listening.
She's not. She's sleeping.
Bella and Birdie, take the day off.